If you have a true scary story that you would like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the big button to do so. And of course, thank you. This was something that happened to me when I was 16. My family, which included myself, my 13-year-old sister, my baby brother, and mom and dad, took a trip during our spring break. We went to Florida as a lot of my father's family lived there, so we were going to be visiting them. However, we were going to be staying at a nearby hotel, so that way no one had to make room for our 5-person family. Being 16, I preferred this anyway because my parents got a room for my sister, Lily, and myself, and then a room for them. I've always been close to Lily, so we just felt like independent adults having the room to ourselves. We pretended we were there on a business trip, pretty much just playing pretend while in the room, and I know that she loved it too. I had also babysat multiple times, so it was normal for me to be alone and being responsible for Lily. This extended to us being at the hotel, where we were allowed to go to the pool whenever we wanted, as long as we told them when we went. The first time we went was great. We had fun, the rest of our family joined us shortly after, and everything was fine. The following day, we wanted to swim again, but also wanted to look mature and independent. So I did both of our makeup, and I reminded Lily that she couldn't go underwater with it. So we got to the pool and started at the shallow end, slowly making our way to the deeper side. We started swimming, racing from one end to the other, and in between breaks, I noticed a boy watching us from the other side of the pool. He was younger, and if I had to guess, he was probably close to my age. I looked over multiple times, trying to make it look like I was just scanning the pool area, but every time, he was looking at me smiling. Finally, I smiled back, not being able to avoid his eye contact. After we raced again, I pointed him out to my sister, and she agreed that he was definitely watching us. She said that he was cute, and then dared me to go talk to him. I was in no way going to do that, though. I had a few crushes on people at my school, but never a relationship, and I didn't know anything on how to even strike up a conversation with this stranger. So after a little teasing, we just continued enjoying our time. But then something else caught my eye. I first looked over where the boy was, and there was now an older guy sitting on the entrance steps into the water, also staring at us. He was smiling and winked when he made eye contact, but this was not a happy feeling. It was awkward, and definitely creepy. So I broke eye contact with him quickly and started looking around for the younger boy. I spotted him again on the diving boards, obviously showing off. He started with normal dives, and then tried to do backflips, or anything else that he could think of. That was until the lifeguard told him to stop. He brushed it off as he walked away from it, and I just remember he looked really cool about it. If I would have been yelled at by a lifeguard, I probably would have scurried away embarrassed, but not him, which I guess only made him look cuter. After the diving, he went to the hot tub and we continued to swim until I heard my mom say my name. She came into the pool room to tell us that we needed to get out for dinner, so we started making our way to the exit. Lily got out before me and was already grabbing towels, as I lingered slowly behind, wondering if I should approach the boy or just continue on. But as I slowly got out of the pool, the older guy that I spotted earlier was still by the stairs, and he stopped me. I just looked at him and he nodded towards the boy in the hot tub and told me that his son thought I was cute. I remember my face turning red, and I looked over at the boy again, who then looked away from me. At the time, I had done that when we made eye contact, so Now I was thinking he was shy or embarrassed that his dad actually told me. I just let out a nervous chuckle and said thanks, not really knowing what else to say. He laughed as well, and offered to give me his son's phone number. Again, not knowing how to react to this, I agreed. Looking back, I probably should have said no, but at that moment I didn't know what to do. Thankfully, I didn't have a cell phone at the time of this event, so I didn't have a number to give. And I certainly wasn't going to give out our landline number. He gave me a piece of paper that already had a phone number written on it. I took it, and as I folded it up, he leaned in close to my ear and said, "You know, you're welcome to come up to our room with us, if you want to have some fun." He stood back up and winked at me, and that horrible feeling came back. I almost felt sick and afraid of what he might do. I said I would have to ask my parents and then quickly ran over to Lily. She asked me what he said and what he gave me, but I just told her it wasn't important and threw the paper away as we left the pool. Once we got back to our room and changed, we met back up with our parents for dinner. As we drove, I told them about the boy that we saw, but then I also mentioned the older man that asked me to go to his room. My dad was driving, and I remember his eyes looking at me in the mirror, and my mom took off her sunglasses and turned around to look at me. At first, I thought maybe I did something wrong, but my dad asked if I kept the number, and I told him no. My mom then told me that I did the right thing by not going, and said that if I saw him again, either one of them, to tell them immediately. But that also meant that we weren't allowed free reign of the pool anymore, which was kind of a bummer, but I also understood why. The next day we went swimming again in the afternoon, but that time, my parents were there. They were in the shallow end with my baby brother. And while Lily and I continued playing on our own, we went without makeup, so we wanted to go down the water slide. While waiting in line, I kept scanning the area, conflicted on if I wanted him to show up or not. While I didn't see the older guy, I did spot the boy who was making his way to the slide. I don't know what came over me, but as he approached, he noticed me and smiled, but I immediately confronted him. I told him, "I'm sorry, but your dad was creepy yesterday." He looked at me confused, so I told him what he said about the phone number, all of it, and he just looked at me like I was crazy. The only thing he said after that was, "I'm here with my grandparents. I don't even know my dad." He then pointed to an older couple in the hot tub, and after we went down the slide, he even called out to them by name, and they looked over to him to watch him go down the slide. Once we were all back in the free swimming pool, he confirmed that he had no idea who that guy was, and that's why he looked away yesterday. He said he thought the guy was saying something to me about him, and he also thought that he was weird. I was overwhelmed hearing this. I'm glad that he wasn't related to that guy, but then I was sick knowing that this full man just invited me, a 16-year-old girl, back to his room. I may have been wearing makeup, but I still looked very young. There is no way that he mistook me for an adult. To add to it, he lied about the boy to try and convince me to go with him to his room. This all told me that he really didn't have any good intentions that day. I told my parents about all this, and they definitely seemed concerned, but again just said to keep an eye out for the old guy, and to let them know. I don't know what else they really could have done at that point either. Thankfully, we never did see him again, but the rest of the day at the pool was off. The boys swam with us, but for the most part, it was just like having a new friend for the time being. I didn't get his real number either. The following day, we were leaving the hotel, so we didn't swim. Not that I really wanted to after all that had happened. I was afraid that guy was going to show up, and I didn't know what he would do if he did. I'm an adult now with a little girl, and it's definitely made me very protective of her and watching everything she does, because such an innocent situation at first could have turned out much, much worse. Hey Raven, I saw your post about stories, and I thought about this trip that I took with my friends back in 2019, and thought you might be interested in it. 3 of my friends, Mason, Andrew, and Phil, and myself, all went camping during our spring break. We were all going to the same uni, but we pretty much kept to ourselves. We were far from the popular crowd, but we still liked to do crazy fun things and to get a little stupid. So, this time, we wanted to go camping, drink, and let loose. We went to a state park that was a few hours away, and found a good place deep in the trees, away from the people. We didn't want someone to report us for being too loud and disruptive, so we tried to stay away from others. Once we got there and set up, all hell broke loose. We probably drank more than we should have, but we stayed at our camps, so I felt that we were safe. We laughed, made fun of each other, vented about the dumb BS we were dealing with at uni. Really, this was a much-needed break for us. But at some point that night, I started hearing what sounded like someone whispering, or talking, just far off. I heard it, and when I noticed Phil cocking his head to the side, I asked if he was hearing it too. He nodded and asked what it was. I shrugged, not knowing what it was, but then we all got quiet. And by the look on their faces, Mason and Andrew must have heard it too. We were in the middle of the woods. We were all intoxicated, and there were still people around somewhere, so we didn't think anything else of it. We just calmed down so we weren't as loud and let it go. Shortly after, we all passed out peacefully. The next morning, I was thankful to wake up without the repercussions of the night prior's drinking, but we couldn't say the same for Andrew. He was feeling it and was not ready to get up yet. So, while he told us to go on without him, deciding to sleep in, we decided to go for a hike. The 3 of us packed our hiking bags and headed off. We were probably about 2 miles away from our campsite. We found a pretty tall rock formation that we climbed over, and saw that there was more forest above. We all agreed to continue through it, wanting to see what we could find. Shortly after entering those trees, the atmosphere seemed to shift. It's hard to explain, and I wish that I had a word for it. It was like being wrapped in a blanket, bathing in the sunlight, and then someone just put a cold, dark metal box over you. Not only was there a shift in temperature, but like being put in a metal box, I also became anxious and was on edge. The density and amount of trees had not changed. There was the same amount of sunlight, yet it felt colder. I looked back at Mason and Phil, and they agreed. Something was different too. However, we wanted to continue on, determined to figure out the cause of the shift. As we walked deeper into the woods, we started hearing the familiar sounds from the night prior. The muffled talking. We figured we were probably close to some other campers. It seemed like a weird spot, and we became curious how they got there. Did they walk all that way and climb up here to camp? Was there a road somewhere that led up there and we were just oblivious? So we continued on. We walked a little further and the talking became clearer and clearer until we found the source. Through the trees, we spotted not only people, but a whole damn village. But these people did not look normal, or at least not modern. They were in old-fashioned style clothing, think Little House on the Prairie style. The tall hats, bonnets, and all. We just stood by the trees, watching them from where we were. We could hear them talk better, And while they were speaking English, it still sounded old, if that made sense. And they were carrying buckets, wheelbarrows, and one of the women was even sitting in front of a small house, washing or doing something to some clothes. What were we witnessing? There were several houses there. Did we just manage to stumble on a neighborhood? Maybe it bumped up to the back of the park. But with the shift in the atmosphere, something still was not sitting right to me. Part of me wanted to approach them and ask about it, but Mason's mouth works faster than my brain, and he very loudly made a comment about the weird-looking hats. Phil and I cringed and looked at him, but then noticed how quiet it grew, and looked back at the village. To my embarrassment, they were all looking at us. But they looked at us like they were bewildered, or maybe even scared, I guess. If all you've ever seen were people dressed like you, and then you saw someone who looked so different, maybe you would have the same reaction. Either way, something was not right, and them being able to see us seemed to make the situation worse. I felt like we needed to get out of there sooner rather than later. I elbowed the other two so we could leave, and they finally agreed. We slowly walked back the way that we entered, climbed down the cliff, and went back to our camp. It didn't seem to take as long, maybe because we walked a little faster, but once back, Andrew was awake, so we explained to him what we saw. He thought that it sounded interesting, and he wanted to see it too, so we all agreed to show him the next day. We were all hungry and tired at that point. The next day, we set off to find the place, this time with our phones with us, wanting to take a few pictures. We typically left them at the camp because the signal was so shoddy. There was no point in carrying them, but once we got to the area, it was just trees. There was no sign of the village. We traced our steps almost to a T. We climbed the same cliff. We could even see the marks that we left in it. We walked through the same trees, making out the flattened part of the grass and fallen leaves, but when we got through the trees, there were nothing but large boulders and more trees. We circled around the area thinking maybe we were somehow off, but we never found it. And that change in the atmosphere wasn't there like last time either. How could a whole village just disappear? Andrew thought we were screwing with him at first, trying to make him feel bad for staying behind, but after a little convincing and us all bringing up the same things, explaining things similarly, he believed us. We went back to our camp once again, completely stumped at what we experienced. After we left, we tried doing some research on the place to see if there was anything about an old town that used to be there, or maybe some kind of show, but we found nothing. We all still bring this up and want to go back, but we haven't had the time since. I really want to know if we saw something we shouldn't have. Like we stepped into another place in time, but I can't even tie a community to this park. If anyone else has experienced something similar, I would love to hear about it. To quote Mr. Stack, maybe someone out there has an answer to our mystery. A couple years back, my girlfriend and I made plans for a fun little spring break trip. Her birthday was going to fall right in the middle of it, so I thought it would be a perfect combo vacation for it too. We wanted to go somewhere warm and sunny, both wanting a break from the cold, gloomy Oregon, but also somewhere that wasn't going to be heavily populated like Miami. So, we decided on a nice little area in South Carolina. We flew, anticipating just getting an Uber anytime we went far, but the area we were going to be staying in had a great food and shopping district, with most of it within walking distance. It was one of the reasons we chose it. We were both avid runners, so being on our feet all day never bothered us. Upon arriving, the hotel was much nicer than anticipated. I almost panicked thinking I accidentally booked the wrong one, but the receipt they gave to the front desk confirmed it. We got our room, which was just as nice, and Hazel loved it, which was the most important to me. Once we got settled into our room, we decided to take it easy that night. We went swimming in the hotel pool, had drinks at their bar, and had the best nachos to go with it. We ended our night back in our room, watching some shows as we fell asleep. We got a late start the following morning, probably just being worn out from the flight and everything catching up to us. After breakfast, we wanted to check out some of the nearby shops, so we set out on foot. As we left the first store, there was a guy sitting on a bench that we walked past. He looked a little rough, but he didn't look homeless. I say this because where we live, we see that a lot. I'm also aware that some people just take care of themselves better than others. He just looked like he had one hell of a night and was trying to recover from it. His short dark hair looked dirty and was sticking up everywhere. He had on jeans that were also dirty and caked with mud on the bottom, and he was wearing a button-up blue collared shirt. Other than the collared shirt, I would assume that he just did some kind of construction work. He also had a cigarette hanging from his mouth and a smartphone in his hands, staring at it. As we passed by, we were in conversation, and he did a double take, looking at us. When we got close enough, he waved, saying, "Hey," in a soft tone, obviously trying to get our attention. We both slowed down but didn't stop, and looked in his direction. "You ladies wouldn't happen to have a lighter on you, would you?" We both shook no, neither of us being smokers. He smiled and said he figured, claiming we looked too good to be smokers, and then laughed, warning us to never start up. Hazel commented that it was never too late to stop, and he laughed again. After wishing each other a good day, he looked back down at his phone and we continued on. The rest of the day went fine. We saw the guy sitting on that same bench, still with an unlit cigarette in his mouth twice more. But he didn't stop us or say anything else to us. I just remembered mentioning to myself that he had been out there for hours, which was odd, but nothing too crazy. We went back to our hotel and had dinner at the restaurant there. But then, the next day, was when things took a turn. It started out normal. We actually took an Uber to the beach and spent most of the day there. The weather was sunny and warm with just a pinch of chill in the air, plus it wasn't crowded at all, which made for the perfect day. We got back to the hotel around 4 and cleaned up so we could go have dinner. The following day was Hazel's birthday, and I was planning a special day for her. But that night, we agreed to try out a local bar and grill. We made our way out of the hotel and headed to our destination on foot. Due to previous experiences in the past, I've become acutely aware of my surroundings. People, animals, buildings, as well as sounds and smells that may affect me. I don't assume everyone that I don't know is suspicious or dangerous, but I do think it's important to know what's around you, if that makes sense. Now, I will also say that Hazel is quite the opposite. I adore her, obviously, but she may be a bit more on the naive side of things, so I have definitely become the protector in the relationship. Don't worry, she would absolutely agree with these sentiments. I mention this because, as we approached the restaurant, I saw the same guy from the day prior, leaning against the building, with his phone in his hand. I know that it was the same guy because he was also wearing the same thing. Still, a little weird, but whatever. He didn't look up at us this time. Hazel didn't seem to notice, and we continued inside. During dinner, Hazel mentioned a little shop she wanted to check out afterwards, and I agreed. It was across the street, so once we finished, we walked towards the intersection closer to us to cross. As we waited for the signal, I noticed the same guy was now walking slowly towards us. He didn't give off any weird vibes yesterday, and same for that moment. But it was still getting dark. and he was definitely bigger than us, so I was cautious, especially when he seemed to avoid eye contact. We all talked the day prior just fine, but maybe he just thought it was awkward and I was being paranoid. We crossed the street and went into the shop, but not before I noticed the guy crossing the street too. We spent some time in the store and chilled a bit, when I noticed the guy didn't come into the shop. After we made our purchase and left the building, I did a quick look around and noticed that the guy was now leaning against the building that we were just in. If he had no intention of speaking to us, why would you cross the street to do the exact same thing you were doing on a different building? And that's when I started getting suspicious. I had Hazel walk a little further ahead of me, and I tried to focus on Hazel talking to me, but also the sound of feet dragging behind us. After a few feet, I was growing impatient, so I gripped Hazel's hand and stopped. I turned around, and I saw this guy walking towards us, but he seemed to be dragging one leg. He wasn't bending his knee. "Can we help you?" I said to him with a slight annoyance in my voice. "I've got something in my pocket for you," he said in a creepy sing-song voice. It sent a chill down my spine, and the shakiness in Hazel's voice was all I needed to kick my fight or flight into gear. I basically told him, we're not interested, and we both picked up our pace. The whole time I could hear him behind us, making this little menacing giggle and repeating the same phrase over and over. He would even holler out for us to guess what it was, saying it was long, hard, and heavy. What kind of sick joke was he going for here? Not to mention the sheer audacity to do this in a public place. The good thing about Hazel and I is that we both could communicate well without speaking. A lot of strong couples can do that. So as we approached the intersection, I grabbed her hand again, we nodded at each other, and instead of pushing the button to cross, we unexpectedly ran through the crosswalk, hoping to throw the guy off. He shouted at us and tried to run across too. Our hotel was right across the street from where we were crossing, so we ran inside. We went to the desk, wanting to report the guy following us, but before we could explain it all, he walked through the doors, repeating what he had been saying. I practically screamed at him to leave us the F alone. Before he could get much further than the door, the guy at the main desk was walking towards him, telling him to leave. The guy waved at us and said that he'd be waiting for us, and then left the hotel. There was no way it was going to end there. I called the police from my phone. No, I wasn't thinking about calling them initially, but was rather focused on trying to get away. When they showed up, the officer talking to us told us the guy was still outside, so they had restrained him to question him. After explaining what all happened, they said they checked him for weapons, drugs, etc., like they normally do, but they found a large pipe in his pant leg. I don't know if I was relieved or more terrified. What even were his intentions? And why? He was fine with us the day prior. He was friendly and talkative, and now he's chasing us with a metal pipe? They said he was also under the influence, so they were taking him in. But they also said that they were quite familiar with the guy. Yet he was just out there, able to keep tormenting and terrorizing others. I was angry. They filed a report, and that was pretty much the end of it, saying nothing happened, so we were okay. No, we were not okay. We both sobered up pretty quickly in our rooms and thankfully slept fine, probably just worn out. I did my best to at least put the incident behind us so I could give Hazel a great birthday. We just Ubered everywhere that day. She seemed to have a great time and was very happy, so I guess I did pretty well. It was just unfortunate that one person could ruin a vacation, or a night, or even someone's life. I'm thankful that we were together and were able to run away, but it scares me to think that he may be out there today, traumatizing other women, and I just hope he was never successful at showing anyone that pipe. So that, my friends, was a collection of some spring break stories. True scary stories that all happened during spring break. During the week of the year where things get crazy out there. Not out here. Nothing happens here. Kansas is landlocked, so no beaches to party at. Not like actual beaches, like some pond beaches, I guess, or lake beaches, however you want to say it. But no like crazy Miami murder snail beaches. Just basic Kansas stuff. Yeah. Never really did anything for spring break. Probably never will. It's just a week for me. I don't take time off. I just work through it. Because that's me. Anyways, friends, if you enjoyed the stories, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, as that helps the channel grow. And if you are feeling ever so bold, you can go down below... And if you're feeling ever so bold, you can go down below the video and leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts. How are you doing? How's it going? Any weekend plans? How tired are you because of this time change? Very. Anyways, you can also send me a story if you have one, as theravendreams.com. There's a big button to push to submit your story, and I'll read it. That's just how that exchange works. You can also join Patreon and memberships to get early access to content like this. Never expected, always appreciated. And yeah. Hope you all have a beautiful weekend. Hope I do see you again here very soon. But until then, remember, you are loved. You are valid. You are important. You are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, my friends, much love and sleep well.